Imagine sitting in a room full of decorated military officers. These men have decades of combat experience. They've seen real battles. They know strategy, tactics, and warfare inside and out. Now imagine a 7-year-old girl walking into that room. The officers decide to tell her war stories, not to educate her, not to inspire her, but to scare her, to show her how brutal and complex war really is. They describe famous battles. They talk about flanking maneuvers and supply lines. They explain how armies move and fight. And then the little girl speaks up. She points at their battle map. She explains why their formation would fail. She describes a better tactic. She corrects their strategy with the calm confidence of a seasoned general. The room goes silent. These men have fought in wars. They've commanded troops. They've studied military history for decades. And a child just told them they were wrong. This sounds impossible. It sounds like fiction. But what you're about to hear actually happened. This is the story of Samantha Hayes, a girl who understood warfare better than trained soldiers. A child who could see patterns in combat that escaped military experts. And the terrifying part, she had never seen a real battle. She had never held a weapon. She had never received formal military training. So how did she do it? How did a 7-year-old correct decorated officers? And what did they discover about her mind that changed everything they thought they knew about strategy? The answer is stranger than you think. And it reveals something shocking about human intelligence that most people never consider. By the end of this video you'll understand why the military took this child seriously, why her insights led to actual changes in combat doctrine, and why her story was classified for over a decade. But first you need to understand where this all began. Because the truth is even more unsettling than you imagine. This story starts in 2003. The location was Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The United States military was deep into operations in Iraq and Afghanistan. Colonel James Merrick was stationed there. He commanded a tactical planning unit. His job was to analyze combat scenarios and develop new strategies. Merrick had a problem. His team kept running simulations for urban warfare. They needed fresh perspectives, new ways to think about old problems. One day Merrick brought his daughter to work. Her name was Samantha. She was 7 years old, quiet, observant. She loved puzzles and games. The base had a family day scheduled. Children could visit and see where their parents worked. It was meant to be fun, educational, nothing serious. Samantha wandered into the strategy room. 5 officers were there. They were studying a simulation of a conflict in Fallujah. The battle had gone badly. They were trying to figure out why. The men noticed the girl watching. They were friendly. They asked if she wanted to hear a story. She nodded. So they told her about the battle. They described how the troops moved, where they positioned, how the enemy responded. They used simple words. They thought they were just entertaining a child. Now here's where things get really interesting. Samantha listened carefully. She studied their map. The officers had marked positions with colored pins. Blue for friendly forces, red for enemy combatants. When they finished their story, Samantha asked a question. Why did the blue team go through that street? The officers smiled. One of them explained. The street offered the fastest route to the objective. It was the logical choice. Samantha shook her head. But the red team can see that street from these 3 buildings, she said. She pointed at the map. The blue team should have split up. Half go through the alley here. Half wait at this corner. Then when the red team shoots at the first group, the second group goes around. The officers stopped smiling. What she described was a complex flanking maneuver. It was tactically sound. More than that, it was the exact mistake that had cost lives in the real battle. Major Dennis Cooper was in the room. He had been at Fallujah. He had lost men on that street. He leaned forward. Why do you think that would work better? He asked. Samantha explained. She used simple words. She talked about angles of sight, cover positions, timing. She described how the enemy would react to the first group, how that would create an opening for the second group. She was right. Completely right. Cooper looked at Merrick. "Does she study military history?" he asked. Merrick shook his head. "She plays chess. She likes strategy board games. That's it." The other officers started asking Samantha questions. They showed her different scenarios, different maps, different problems. Every time she found flaws in their plans. Every time she suggested improvements. And every time her suggestions made perfect sense. One officer joked that she should be teaching their classes, but his voice had an edge. Because this wasn't just impressive, it was unsettling. A 7-year-old shouldn't be able to do this. Not without training, not without experience. So they decided to test her properly, to see if this was just luck, or something else entirely. But if you think that's crazy, wait until you hear this. The next week, Colonel Merrick assembled a formal test. He brought in 6 senior officers. All of them had combat experience. All of them had advanced training in tactics and strategy. They prepared 5 scenarios, real battles from recent conflicts. They changed the names and locations, but the tactical situations were authentic. They presented each scenario to Samantha. They described the terrain, the forces involved, the objectives. Then they asked her what she would do. Scenario 1 was based on a mountain ambush in Afghanistan. The original plan had been to send troops straight up a valley. The enemy had attacked from high ground. 8 soldiers died. Samantha studied the map for less than 3 minutes. The troops should not go in the valley, she said. They should climb at night. Small groups. They go around to the high places first. Then when morning comes, they're above the bad guys instead. This was essentially a textbook mountain warfare tactic, but it required understanding elevation advantages, fire superiority, enemy psychology. She was 7 years old. Scenario 2 was an urban rescue operation. Hostages in a compound, multiple buildings, limited intelligence on enemy positions. Samantha suggested sending a small team to create a distraction. While the enemy focused on that threat, the main force would breach from an unexpected angle. She even specified which building to hit first, the one that would cut off enemy reinforcements. Scenario 3 was a convoy ambush. The standard military response is to push through the kill zone. Don't stop. Don't let the enemy fix you in place. Samantha suggested something different. She said half the convoy should push forward, but the other half should immediately turn around and attack the ambush position from behind. Major Cooper challenged her. "That's not standard doctrine," he said. "I know," Samantha replied. "But if everyone does the same thing, the bad guys know what to expect. If you do something different, they get confused." She was describing the principle of tactical surprise, a concept that takes most officers years to fully grasp. By the end of the session, Samantha had analyzed all 5 scenarios. Her suggestions weren't perfect. A few had flaws that actual combat experience would have revealed. But her success rate was over 70%. That's better than most junior officers. Better than some senior officers. The men in the room were stunned. They asked Merrick permission to bring in a psychologist, someone who specialized in cognitive assessment. They needed to understand what they were seeing. The psychologist's name was Dr. Richard Holden. He had worked with military intelligence for 15 years. He had evaluated hundreds of soldiers, pilots, special operations personnel. He spent 3 days with Samantha. He ran cognitive tests, pattern recognition exercises, spatial reasoning challenges. His report was 12 pages long, but the key finding was simple. Samantha had an extraordinary ability to visualize 3-dimensional space. She could hold complex spatial relationships in her mind. She could mentally simulate movement and predict outcomes. More than that, she had no emotional attachment to conventional thinking. She didn't know what everyone did, so she thought freely, creatively. Dr. Holden wrote that she processed tactical problems the way some people process music or mathematics. It was intuitive, natural. He compared her to chess prodigies. Children who could see 20 moves ahead without conscious effort. But chess is a game. This was warfare. Real life. Real consequences. And that's when the military made a decision that would change everything. This brings us to the most shocking discovery of all. Colonel Merrick wrote a classified report. He sent it up the chain of command. He recommended creating a special observation program to study Samantha's abilities further. 3 weeks later, he received orders from the Pentagon. The orders said Samantha Hayes was now a special consultant to the Tactical Analysis Division. She would review sanitized combat scenarios, provide assessments. All information would be classified. She was 7 years old, and she had just become one of the youngest military consultants in American history. The arrangement was unusual. Samantha would visit Fort Bragg twice a month. She would spend 3 hours reviewing scenarios. Then she would go home. She would never see real combat footage, never hear about casualties, never know these were real situations. To her it was just puzzle solving, strategy games, fun challenges. But to the officers, it was something else, because Samantha kept finding things they missed. One case involved a planned operation in Iraq. Special forces were going to raid a compound. Intelligence suggested 15 enemy combatants inside. The standard plan was to breach from 2 sides simultaneously. Overwhelming force, quick extraction. Samantha studied the compound layout. She noticed something. The building had a courtyard in the center. The courtyard had one exit to a back alley. If the good guys come in from 2 sides, the bad guys will run to the courtyard, she said. Then they go out the back. Nobody's watching the back. She was right. The plan had no coverage on the rear exit. In the confusion of a 2-sided breach, enemy combatants could easily escape. The officers revised the plan. They added a team to cover the back alley. When the actual operation happened, 3 insurgents ran exactly where Samantha predicted. They were captured instead of escaping. Another case involved convoy routes. The military was planning supply runs through a contested province. They had 3 potential routes. Each had risks. Analysts spent days weighing options: fuel efficiency, distance, terrain, known enemy positions. They finally selected Route B. It was longer but seemed safer. When Samantha saw the map, she frowned. "This road goes by a lot of buildings," she said. "And it has to slow down here at this curve. That's where the bad guys will wait." Route B looked safer on paper, but Samantha saw the tactical vulnerability. The curve forced vehicles to slow down. Buildings provided cover for attackers. It was a perfect ambush site. The officers investigated. Intelligence confirmed increased enemy activity near that curve. They changed to Route A. Route B was attacked 2 days later. The convoy that would have been there was safe on a different road. Over 18 months, Samantha reviewed 47 scenarios. Her insights influenced 32 actual operations. 7 times, her suggestions directly prevented casualties. But then something happened. Something the military didn't expect. Something that would end the entire program. Samantha started having nightmares. She didn't know the scenarios were real, but her mind knew she was solving problems about danger, about conflict, about people trying to hurt each other. She was still just a child, and the weight of these puzzles was affecting her. She became anxious. She stopped sleeping well. Her father noticed. Colonel Merrick was proud of his daughter's abilities, but he was also a father. He saw what this was doing to her. He made a decision. He requested that the program be terminated. He said Samantha needed to be a normal child, not a military asset. The Pentagon agreed. In early 2005, the program ended. All records were classified. Samantha went back to her normal life. But the story doesn't end there, because what the military learned from her changed how they thought about strategy itself. So what does all this mean for us today? The military didn't just study Samantha. They studied what made her different. They wanted to understand how she could see things trained officers missed. Dr. Holden continued his research. He wasn't working with Samantha anymore, but he was investigating the cognitive mechanisms she had demonstrated. He formed a hypothesis. He called it unburdened pattern recognition. Here's what it means. When you train someone in military tactics, you teach them rules, standard operating procedures, doctrine. These rules are useful. They're based on experience. They work most of the time, but they also create mental boundaries. They make it harder to see alternatives. You start thinking in prescribed patterns. Samantha had no training. She had no doctrine. Her mind was unburdened by conventional thinking. She saw each scenario as a pure logic puzzle. She didn't think about what soldiers normally do. She thought about what would actually work. This led to a radical experiment. In 2006, the Army started a new program. They recruited civilians with no military background. Gamers, chess players, puzzle enthusiasts, people with strong spatial reasoning skills. They showed these civilians combat scenarios. They asked for fresh perspectives, ideas that might not fit standard doctrine. The program was called Civilian Strategic Insight Panel. It ran for 4 years. The results were classified until 2019. When the documents were finally released, they revealed something stunning. The civilian panel identified tactical vulnerabilities in 63% of scenarios reviewed. Many of these vulnerabilities had been missed by traditional analysis. Their suggestions weren't always practical. Sometimes they didn't account for real-world constraints, equipment limitations, political considerations, but about 40% of their insights led to actual changes in tactical planning, new approaches to urban combat, alternative convoy strategies, revised rules of engagement. The military learned something fundamental. Expertise is valuable, experience is crucial, but fresh perspective is irreplaceable. Samantha had proven this accidentally. She had shown that sometimes the best strategic mind is the one that doesn't know what can't be done. But there's an even deeper truth here, one that applies far beyond military strategy. Human brains are incredibly powerful, but they're also shaped by what we learn, by what we're taught, by what we practice. When you spend years studying something, you gain expertise, but you also develop blind spots. You stop questioning basic assumptions. You follow established patterns. Children don't have this limitation yet. Their minds are more flexible, more open, more willing to consider unconventional solutions. Samantha wasn't special because she was smarter than military officers. She was special because she was free from their mental constraints. This is why innovation often comes from outsiders. Why breakthroughs happen when someone from a different field approaches an old problem. Why diversity of thought is so powerful. The military spent millions training officers in tactics and strategy, and they should. Training and experience matter. But they learned that sometimes you also need someone who doesn't know the rules, someone who can look at a problem with completely fresh eyes. That's what Samantha gave them. Not superior intelligence. Not magical intuition, just an unburdened perspective. And when they tested this principle systematically, it worked. Civilians with strong reasoning skills, but no military training could identify vulnerabilities that career soldiers missed. The implications are staggering. For business, for science, for any field where established thinking dominates. Sometimes the answer to your hardest problem is sitting in the mind of someone you'd never think to ask, someone who doesn't know what's impossible. Before we wrap up, there's one final thing you need to know. So what happened to Samantha Hayes? Where is she now? And did her early involvement with military strategy affect her life? According to sources, Samantha grew up normally. She stopped consulting for the military after the program ended. She was 8 years old when it stopped. Her memories of it faded. She knew she had helped her father with work puzzles, but she didn't know the full scope, didn't know her suggestions had influenced real operations, didn't know she had helped save lives. Her father never told her. He wanted her to have a normal childhood, to not carry that weight. Samantha went to public school. She was good at math and science. She played soccer. She had friends. She was by all accounts a regular kid. She graduated high school in 2014. She attended university. Reportedly, she studied engineering, not military science, not strategy, just standard mechanical engineering. In interviews years later, Colonel Merrick spoke carefully about those events. He never used Samantha's real name. He never provided identifying details, but he confirmed the core story. He said it was one of the most humbling experiences of his career. Watching a child outsmart seasoned officers, realizing how much his own expertise had blinded him to simple solutions, he said it changed how he approached problems. He started questioning assumptions more, asking subordinates for wild ideas, welcoming perspectives from people with no tactical training. Other officers from that program had similar reactions. Many of them became advocates for cognitive diversity in military planning. They pushed for inclusion of non-traditional thinkers in strategy sessions. This shift had real-world impact. The modern military uses civilian advisors much more than in the past. Tech experts, urban planners, psychologists, game designers. They bring outside perspectives. They challenge conventional wisdom. They help identify blind spots. This approach has been credited with several tactical innovations, new counterinsurgency methods, better urban warfare protocols, more effective intelligence analysis. But the lessons extend beyond the military. Think about your own life, your own work, your own challenges. How often do you ask someone with no experience in your field for their opinion? How often do you consider ideas from complete outsiders? Probably not often, because we value expertise. We trust people who know what they're doing. And we should. Expertise matters. Experience matters. Training matters. But expertise also creates blind spots. You become so familiar with how things are done that you stop seeing alternative possibilities. This is why companies bring in outside consultants, why writers seek feedback from non-writers, why scientists collaborate across disciplines. Fresh perspective reveals what familiarity conceals. An outsider sees the obvious thing that you've trained yourself to ignore. Samantha's story proves this in the most dramatic way possible. A child with no training, no experience, no doctrine, could see tactical solutions that eluded experienced officers, not because she was smarter, but because she was unburdened. So here's the practical takeaway. When you're stuck on a problem, don't just ask experts. Ask someone who knows nothing about your field, someone who will ask dumb questions, someone who will suggest impossible solutions, because sometimes the impossible solution is actually possible. You just stopped seeing it, because you learned too much. The military learned this from a 7-year-old. They institutionalized it. They built systems to capture outside perspective. You can do the same thing. In your career, in your business, in your creative work, in your personal challenges. Value expertise, but also value innocence. Value the unschooled mind, the fresh eye, the unburdened perspective. If this opened your eyes, there's one last twist to this story. Something that wasn't revealed until recently. Something that changes how we understand what really happened. In 2018, a researcher named Dr. Emily Grant published a study on tactical cognition. She had reviewed the classified files from the Civilian Strategic Insight Panel. She found something unexpected. The civilians in the program weren't just providing random guesses. They weren't just throwing out wild ideas. They were using a specific cognitive approach. Dr. Grant called it simulation-based reasoning. Instead of applying learned rules, they mentally simulated scenarios. They watched them play out in their minds. They saw what would happen. This is exactly what Samantha had been doing. She wasn't applying tactical doctrine. She was running mental simulations, watching imaginary soldiers move across imaginary terrain, seeing where things would go wrong. This ability isn't rare. Most people can do it. Children do it naturally when they play. Gamers do it constantly, but we're taught to stop doing it. We're taught to follow rules instead, to apply formulas, to use established methods. We trade simulation for instruction, we trade imagination for procedure, and we become less effective problem solvers as a result. Not because we get dumber, but because we get more constrained. The military officers in that room at Fort Bragg were smart men, educated, experienced, capable, but they had stopped simulating. They had started applying doctrine. Their minds followed grooves worn deep by training and repetition. Samantha's mind had no grooves, so she simulated freely. She saw the scenarios playing out. She spotted the problems. This is the real lesson. Not that children are better strategists than adults, but that we all have a natural strategic ability that training can accidentally suppress. You had this ability once. You probably still have it, but you might have learned to ignore it, to distrust it, to override it with learned rules. The question is, can you get it back? Can you learn to simulate again, to see scenarios playing out in your mind, to trust your imagination as much as your knowledge? The answer is yes, but it takes practice. It takes permission. It takes actively resisting the urge to immediately apply learned solutions. It takes thinking like a 7-year-old girl who didn't know she was supposed to let the experts be right. Let's recap what we've learned. Samantha Hayes was 7 years old when she walked into a room full of military officers. They told her war stories to scare her. Instead, she corrected their tactics and battle formations. She wasn't a genius. She wasn't psychic. She just had an unburdened mind. She could simulate scenarios without the constraints of military doctrine. Her insights led to a classified consultation program. Her suggestions influenced real military operations. And her example inspired a radical shift in how the military approaches strategic planning. The lesson is universal. Expertise creates knowledge but also blind spots. Fresh perspective sees what experience misses. And sometimes the best solution comes from the person least qualified to offer it. This applies to you, right now, today. Whatever problem you're facing, whatever challenge you're stuck on, whatever decision you're struggling with, you have options. You can keep asking experts, keep following established methods, keep doing what everyone says you should do, or you can ask someone completely outside your field, someone who will give you the wrong answer. The unburdened perspective, the simulation-based insight, both approaches have value, but if you're stuck, if the expert answers aren't working, if the standard methods keep failing, then maybe you need a 7-year-old's perspective, not literally, but figuratively. You need the mind that doesn't know the rules, the fresh eye, the ungrooved brain. If this story opened your eyes, do 3 things. First, hit that subscribe button. We dive deep into stories like this. Stories that challenge how you think. Stories that reveal hidden truths about human potential. Second, drop a comment. Tell me about a time when someone with no expertise gave you the perfect solution. Or tell me about a problem you're facing right now. Let's see if this community can offer some unburdened perspective. Third, watch the next video. It's about a 9-year-old who rewrote computer code that a team of engineers couldn't fix. Same principle, different field, equally mind-blowing. But here's the deeper challenge, the real call to action. This week, find someone who knows nothing about what you do. Explain your current biggest challenge to them. Ask for their thoughts. Don't dismiss their ideas because they're naive. Don't ignore their suggestions because they're impractical. Listen, actually listen. See the problem through their unburdened eyes. You might be surprised. They might see the obvious thing you've trained yourself to miss. They might suggest the impossible solution that's actually possible. Samantha Hayes proved that strategic brilliance doesn't require experience. It requires clear thinking, pattern recognition, mental simulation, and freedom from conventional constraints. You have those abilities. You were born with them. You still have them. You just might have buried them under years of learning and training and expertise. So dig them out. Use them. Trust them. Think like a child who doesn't know what can't be done. That's where breakthrough lives. That's where innovation happens. That's where the future gets built. One unburdened thought at a time.